for so many first-time founders, I'm a big fan of stair-stepping into entrepreneurship. One of my favorite tweets that I've ever written just personally is, start with an agency, get to cash flow positive, and then bootstrap an asset, whether that's a SaaS company or e-commerce business, sell that asset, become, financially secure, and then do whatever you want. But along the way, you kind of prepare yourself for the next stage of business.
In this episode, I talked to Andrew Gazdecki from MicroAcquire, and he started a couple other businesses. He sold 2 of them, and in that process, he decided there needed to be a better way to buy and sell businesses. So that's where MicroAcquire came from. They're a marketplace originally focused specifically on SaaS businesses, but they've brought into all of software. The reason I wanted to talk to him, he doesn't run a traditional newsletter or something like that, but he uses audience really well to grow MicroAcquire. He uses his personal brand, connections with others, partnerships, a bunch of fun things. So we get into how he grew his Twitter audience from 30,000 followers like just a couple months ago to over 70,000 now. His approach to Twitter, with some of the arguments or beefs that he started with like TechCrunch and others, where he thinks those lines are. We also get into how he uses Cameo. So he has these great ads or announcing partnerships and others from Russ Hanneman on Silicon Valley, talking about this, and they're really entertaining. So there's a lot of fun things in this episode, and I think you're going to like it. I'll get out of the way and we'll dive in. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nathan. Always a pleasure to be chatting with you.
Yeah, so I feel like we'll just dive in. There are a lot of companies in the like brokerage, help me sell your business kind of space. I think of like FE International, Empire Flippers, Flippa, all of these. So 1, you're going into a really crowded market with MicroAcquire. And then 2, you're coming at it like, it feels like you're a force of nature. Sam Parr and I, we're actually talking about this, of like where some people start a project and it's like, oh, I'm going to do this thing. And then other people do like effectively the same thing. I mean, it's different in a lot of ways, right? But the same category, and come in and just completely dominate and grow so fast. And it feels like a fundamentally different thing. What's your take on that, of coming into a crowded space and then the amount of momentum that you've come in with?
Yeah, we'll definitely have a lot of respect for all those companies that you mentioned, and appreciate the compliment. I guess I just think, the market that is specifically acquisitions just hasn't seen a lot of innovation in a decade. The 2 of the businesses you mentioned are service businesses, Flippa being a marketplace. And I looked at that and I just thought there's an angle here that really sellers could benefit more than the buyers. And I felt buyers were benefiting. And so I took a left while everyone was going right. And then coming in from an entrepreneur's view instead of a buyer's view or an investment banker's view or an M&A advisor view, this was, me saying, okay, I've gone through 2 acquisitions. I think I have a few unique insights into, what would it take to make me comfortable putting my business, generating millions of dollars onto a marketplace, and then what information and educational pieces would I need to feel comfortable to facilitate an acquisition. And so I just kind of built what I felt acquisition should be. We still have like a long way to go. Like we're still like just getting, like we've done a really good job connecting buyers and sellers, and all the acquisitions are facilitated off platform. We've been working on a lot of tooling to really add value to the acquisition, if that makes sense. So we're looking to innovate on things like due diligence, or even simple items like writing a letter of intent or streamlining escrow, because everyone complains about escrow.com. So yeah, I mean, sometimes that just happens in markets. Like a new entrant comes in with a different angle towards the problem, a different viewpoint. And I think my unique insight there was just I had been on just the side of the table that maybe the other companies had not. But it's also a giant market. So I think a rising boat lifts all tides. So, we're here to MicroAcquire. I just made MicroAcquire to help entrepreneurs get acquired and succeed. And so I think also as, MicroAcquire picks steam, it helps everyone else in the market as well. So, but yeah, I don't have a good answer to that. I don't know. I think this will sound cheesy, but I'd like to say I built MicroAcquire with love. Like I launched it in the middle of the pandemic. I didn't have a business model. I had no idea how I was going to make money. I just knew I wanted to work with entrepreneurs and startups. And the rest is kind of history, along the way, talking to customers, getting feedback from them. Pretty much everything we do is basically feedback from customers. I'm not Steve Jobs or anything like that, so I can't read people's minds. So I ask what ideas you have. But yeah, it's been a fun journey so far. MicroAcquire is about to turn 2, which is pretty wild.
That first version that you launched, what did that look like? What was the very early stages of it?
The first version was just a simple marketplace with a couple key changes that I hadn't seen in the market. One was privacy and anonymity, and then no fees or commissions for founders. So it was the first marketplace where you could meet buyers and sell your business without paying a 15% commission like you typically would with a broker or something like that. So I think that was kind of a change. And our business model today is we charge buyers for access to the platform to connect with sellers and have negotiations that lead towards negotiations. But yeah, the first version required a lot of vetting of the buyers. So every buyer needed like a LinkedIn profile. Some people have complained about that, but I personally would never sell my business to someone without a LinkedIn profile. I need to know where you worked. Like, do you have anyone that's vouched for you? Not just like John 99245. Like I need to know who you are. And we're going to add other ways of verification, but I think that was a big one. And then also real-time metrics integration. So when we launched, you could connect like Stripe and Chartmobile and Profitwell and Barometrics to get like a nice pretty graph of like the revenue to help with due diligence. And then also founders, and everything was private. So you didn't know what the business was. And as a founder, you had complete control over the process. So when you work with a broker, sometimes they could be kind of showing your business to a lot of people.
Right.
And you may not know who those people are. They could even be competitive to your business. And so I think what MicroAcquire did that kind of, and I'm just guessing here because I haven't really like taken a step back and been like, what did we do right?
Yeah.
I'm usually thinking about what can we be doing better? We really put the founder in control. They were the ones able to choose which buyers to speak to. They were the ones able to share which information they wanted to and which information they did not want to share. And again, it was completely free. So it was very low friction to get onto the platform. And then I think just the caliber of buyers and the caliber of listings. So we vet every listing. We vet every buyer now that registers as a MicroAcquire premium buyer. That's where you can contact sellers. So I think it was just kind of like going from, let's just call it like a car dealership to like a Ferrari shop. If that makes sense, where all the cars are vetted, and if you want to know who the owner is, you have to pay for that access. But it was a very specific towards startups, specifically SaaS. So I think that's another thing that I'm thinking of now is we went very narrow at the beginning, very narrow. So we were very specific on specifically bootstrap SaaS companies.
Yeah, I think the approach in different marketplaces is always interesting. When a marketplace to sell businesses is the generic category, but then the twist on it of the seller not paying anything and it being the buyer who pays, a subscription for access. Well, I think that makes for an interesting twist, because then you're going to have this much higher pipeline of, high quality businesses to look at. And so if the seller's paying for that, that makes sense. It reminds me of like Bumble as a dating app being like, yep, still within the category of dating apps, but women have to send the first message. And like that little bit of a twist makes the marketplace feel very different and changes the dynamics of it.
Yeah, I was going to say someone called MicroAcquire Shark Tank, and like if Shark Tank and Tinder had a kid. I thought that was kind of an interesting analogy. But yeah, I'd say the unique insights I had was, again, like from my perspective, if I'm going to list a business, I need to know who's seeing my information. I want to be in control of, what information is being disclosed or being displayed publicly. And I don't want to commit until I really know the quality of the buyers. And so that, I think, was very appealing to just being an entrepreneur. I think I, understood the needs of other entrepreneurs and just kind of got it right. But I'm not going to lie, when I first launched it, I keep a journal that I update every month. It's not like a weird, hey, dear diary thing. It's I do like what's going really well, what are some things I'm worried about, and then things I'm grateful for, just to kind of keep a story log of my life. And before I launched MicroAcquire, I actually, because this idea had been attempted before, like a real startup acquisition marketplace. I think some of the other marketplaces are more geared towards, content sites and domains and affiliate websites, but not real startups like SaaS companies, e-commerce companies, crypto companies. We've moved into a number of different categories, but I wrote in my journal, I was like, I don't know if it's going to work, but at least it looks good, because I just thought it needed to exist so bad for entrepreneurs that we put a lot of thought into user experience and design. So it felt modern. When you're working with startup founders, you kind of, you want to really build trust. Like, yeah, if you're going to sell your business with us, your startup, we know how to build startups as well, and design them well and make them feel like something like this feels legitimate. And I think that's what I would call, closing the credibility gap. Really, that first impression is so important. So really kind of overdid the initial MVP, if you will.
Yeah, I think that design is one of those things where you can go a long ways. And it's probably the first thing that people cut when it comes to an MVP. And that's just, I'm like, nope, that's not an MVP. You have to cut features. You can't cut like the quality of the design. And if I have a limited budget, I'm for sure spending half of it, if not more, on design. So I think you made the right move there.
Yeah, I think today, I don't know if we're going to go off topic here, but I think a lot of startups today can legitimately have user experience and design as their competitive advantage. Just saving people a couple clicks, making things easier to use, having a product where you don't have 50 tutorial videos you got to watch or a course you have to take. That's a huge advantage. And there's a lot of products that are very clunky and kind of feel like a car with, like a jet ski engine added in, like just kind of like a Jenga thing. Yeah. There's just so much technical debt to the product. I think though there's some products out there that I think could be, rethought in terms of like the experience and the design they're delivering to the customers. But that's probably a whole nother topic.
Yeah. But we agree. And anyone who's listened to this show knows that I care deeply about design. One thing that I want to ask about and spend a lot of time on is content strategy. If I go to your website and go to the About page, it just lists your title or like your job description, your role as marketing. And so I'm imagining that's where you spend the majority of your time. And from the outside, it looks like content marketing is either a very large or the largest portion of where you spend your time and how you're looking to grow MicroAcquire. Can you talk about how you think about content marketing and the growth of the business?
Yeah, I think that was twofold. So number one, the first thing that happened to me when Business Apps was acquired, I had like 5 founder friends reach out and they said, how did you sell your business? How does this work? What, so as entrepreneurs, we're not trained to sell businesses. We're not educated on what is due diligence? What are the legal steps of an acquisition? So I felt it was a two-folded problem with a benefit. And when I say two-folded, not really a problem, but point number one, yeah, it's a phenomenal growth channel for us. We think heavily in terms of, what is the content that entrepreneurs will need when they're going through an acquisition? Because the more we can educate them on acquisitions, the more we'll be able to facilitate. And I think that's been crucial. But then two, there was just no content in the market. There's books on fundraising, there's books on marketing, there's books on design, there's a couple books on exits, but there just is such a disproportional amount of content available for everything but a startup being acquired that we felt, there's an opportunity here to kind of be almost, I don't want to say thought leader, but, kind of write the book, if you will, on, this is, but also important to note is we write content for the seller, not for the buyer. We kind of think, the buyers are set. The buyers that we work with are, private equity firms, corporate dev teams, other startups, people that generally are sophisticated with, and also a lot of first-time buyers. But so the content still applies, but it gets you in the head of the entrepreneur. But we wanted to really empower the founder. So you'll notice every piece of content is angled towards the seller, not the buyer, if that makes sense. And I felt that was critical and just something cool to do for other founders. Not like, hey, this is an article on how to get like the cheapest SaaS acquisition possible. So we read articles on how to maximize your startup's exit, as an example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that perspective is in your founding story for the company, but then it's interesting that it makes sense that it carries through all of your content marketing as well, because in the same way that you have to know who your customer is, which in a marketplace, you have a lot of different customers, or you have both sides of it, but
that's something, you're onto something. So that's something that we determined very, very early. So when we raised our seed round, I hired my former VP of product, VP of engineering, my former CFO, and my former head of marketing, who's now gone because he was like 1 foot in. He started this agency called Brand Arrow. So if anyone needs help with Facebook ads or just any sort of SaaS marketing, shout out to him, Brand Arrow. I told him like, hey, I'm a big fan. I need like a micro mafia at one point. So I told him to dive in on that. But we did an offsite and we defined our culture, our values, but really specifically, like you said, who was our customer? Because it could be so many people. It could be, buyers, but there's so many different types of buyers. Which ones are we going to cater towards? And then there's sellers. There's so many different types of sellers. There's people looking to sell content sites, again, domains, Amazon FBA businesses, SaaS founders. And so we really narrowed in, got super specific with our buyer, and that really guides a lot of the decisions that we make, all the way from the content to the product. And I think that's really crucial in the early days because you can always expand outwards. There's a theory, I don't know if you've heard of this, but the bowling ball theory. You've probably gone through this with your business where, you start with one sort of audience and then, or one customer segment, and there's just like these natural sort of like, other segments to target. For us, it was like e-commerce. And then we've been seeing a lot of just miscellaneous profitable software companies. So now we're a little bit more broad. So when I describe MicroAcquire to people, I say it's a marketplace to sell profitable software businesses, not just SaaS anymore. But we started really specific with SaaS founders being our initial customer.
Yeah, like narrowing in on that is always a good thing. Okay, so content strategy, I'm seeing you do a lot of different things. One, let's just take Twitter as a starting point. So I was looking back in August, you had 30,000 followers on Twitter. You have 73,000 followers today. You're tweeting 5 to 10 times a day often. Like you got a lot of posts going out. It seems like they're resonating, and obviously from the growth and all of that. You have a lot of these single post or like single sentence, here's an idea, latch onto it, like positioning type things. Like one example is instead of thinking of 100 plus startup ideas, pick a customer you'd love to serve and solve their problems. That gets 1,000 likes, 150 retweets or more. I want to know two things. One, tell me about your Twitter strategy of how it fits into the broader business and what you're trying to do there. And then two, we'll just get into what's working and what's not working.
Yeah, definitely. So Twitter strategy, there is absolutely none aside from having fun. And I'm a firm believer of this. I think when people try to have a social media strategy where their goal is to grow followers, and so you start doing stuff like looking at other people's tweets, and then you take a tweet, and this how I see this all the time with some content I put out. Like, oh, that looks very familiar, but I don't care.
Yeah.
But they're trying to grow their audience, and they're not being authentic to who they are, and they're trying to be, they're trying to, I guess what I'm trying to say is find a way to utilize, social platforms in a way that you enjoy. So one thing to notice, if you look at all my tweets, they're all from my iPhone. Like, they're not from my web app. They're not from a scheduled Twitter thing. I just like that tweet. I remember writing that tweet. I was like in my kitchen. I was just like, you'll also see a tweet right before this podcast. That's just me. I was waiting for you to come on this podcast. I was like, So I think my point being, and I think this goes even broader, is just, if you want to be great at anything, and I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form I'm great at Twitter, but you just have to enjoy it. And then if you enjoy it, you're consistent at it. And then I do have a few rules though. I don't usually comment on people's, because once you start getting to a certain point on Twitter, you can just post like entrepreneurship is awesome. And then people have like 100 questions. And I just don't have the bandwidth to answer all those questions. So I usually I'm watching those questions, and I'll usually, if something's interesting, I'll use that as a new tweet. And then you get tweeted at a lot, like, hey, follow me, like, hey, will you be on my podcast? So I kind of have a rule of like, stay in my lane, if that makes sense. Yep. I've done a little bit of like beef marketing and stuff like that. I'm sure you saw me like call out like TechCrunch and maybe like throw a couple shots at like just joking, like VC sort of like, shit posting type stuff.
Yeah.
And that works. It definitely works. And there's some strategy behind that. That's probably one part of my social media strategy that was strategic. It's effective, but it's not for the faint of heart. Because you make people pick sides. So you're going to upset some people, and you're going to make some people really cheer you on. And so I'm kind of done with that phase. That was fun.
So if someone is in that phase, or they're thinking about it, right? They have a specific audience for their business, or like a specific focus. They've chosen a niche, and they have some strong opinions, and they're not the kind of person who's like, like, let's not cause any conflict. They're like, no, I'd be willing to get into a little bit of conflict. What would you say? What's your advice on going down that path of like, if you're thinking of, oh, there's a TechCrunch in your space or someone else that you might want to pick a fight with?
You just got to really believe it. Like, and I think it has to be factual. Like what I said about TechCrunch as an example, just go on their website right now and see it, and tell me if you can find an article about a bootstrap startup. Like, that's all I said, is like, you guys are a publication that writes about just venture-backed businesses. That's it. And, what kind of really struck a chord with me with that was my prior company, Business Apps. We were in TechCrunch all the time. Like, they loved writing about, real business building stories, partnerships, version 2.0 launches, international experience, like, stories that inspire entrepreneurs. And they move towards, this really venture backed sort of, you're either in it or you're not in it. And I just politely called him out one time. And then some people were like, yeah. And then I was like, maybe there's something here. And then and this is how I always think of, or how I validate ideas as well, is, so I have a publication now called bootstrappers.com, which is just kind of like what I wanted. Like, just, I want inspiring stories. Like, back in like 2010, you would read articles on TechCrunch about like two people, they just launched a product, no funding. I remember some of the writers I used to work with, they all left. They're all gone. It's like a new company. It's been, acquired by 4 different companies, and, some of the older writers are out, but the older crew would kind of joke and say, hey, VCs, like, I hope you thank me one day for writing about all the companies that I discovered and then you funded later. Now the opposite is entirely true. And so I I wanted to bring that style of, journalism back, where it's stories about companies making like 200,000 a year or 500,000 or 2 million. Because, when I read an article about a company raising 200 million and then 500 million like the next week, it doesn't really inspire me too much. And I think that's celebrated so much today in, the startup community that I think it's a little dangerous. I think as a young entrepreneur, like if you think the path to being a successful founder is get into Y Combinator, raise a bunch of funding, get featured in, these magazines, because that's what happens when you get funding. Like that's literally like the only way to get covered sometimes is funding announcements. And even then it's hard because there's so many. So I think that creates an environment where a lot of entrepreneurs are focused on raising capital rather than raising or generating revenue from customers. Mm-hmm. And that was just something that I lived through. I had a really good mentor. Are we going off topic too far?
Well, I do want to take it back to like the idea of like picking a fight, but finish the thought with the mentor, because everyone listening knows that ConvertKit is bootstrapped. I'm a huge fan of that. And the same reason that you're picking a fight with TechCrunch that you did, I would do the same, because we experienced that of, we could have more revenue, more customers, all of that than anyone else, but they're only going to write about the VC funded version. So,
yeah. So long story short, business apps, my company prior, bootstrapped that business. And I just had a really good mentor, Christian Friedland, and he was always challenging me to think against the typical Silicon Valley path. And we were based in San Francisco for 5 years, eventually moved to San Diego, and that's where we exited the business. But yeah, now that like I'm on my third, I took a little hiatus and went into crypto land for a little bit. So got away from like SaaS and stuff like that. But now I'm back home, and yeah, just saw that and said, hey. And then actually TechCrunch did write a little bit about bootstrapping. And then I've also seen a lot of other people start saying the same thing, like agreeing, which I think has been cool.
Yeah.
Which isn't like, it's not a bad thing that TechCrunch or any publication, like I don't want to just hone in on TechCrunch, because they've done so much for so many founders. But yeah, other people, I feel like the first shot was fired, like, hey, we missed the old version of, maybe mix it up a little bit. And they've taken some of that feedback and have actually written about some bootstrap companies. And then other people have kind of said the same thing, like, the startup ecosystem is really turning into this, fundraised, crazed news cycle. And, there's 99% of other startups that aren't going down that path. So that creates kind of like a movement. So that's like the benefit of beef marketing sometimes is you, again, make people pick sides. Some people agree with it, some people don't. Yeah. So advice for anyone in terms of beef marketing. Again, going back to my original point, you have to believe it. You have to believe what you're saying. It can't just be like, 1 foot in. From my perspective, I think most of the major tech publications should write about, businesses that are profitable and sustainable and ones that are raising a bunch of capital and going public. Like a good mix would be amazing, because then that gives you a true picture of, all the different styles of entrepreneurship, the ones that are at the top of the top and the ones that are taking a more sustainable, practical approach, just giving a more, realistic view into the world of entrepreneurship instead of just kind of, putting this one style on a pedestal. Yeah, just get ready for, nothing like bad happened. So I would just say also with beef marketing, it doesn't have to be just an individual or an organization. Like good examples. So I've always had a branding an enemy in all of my businesses. For business apps, it was large businesses. Like our main sales pitch was, Starbucks down the street paid $2 million for their mobile app, blah, blah, blah. Would you like to create that same customer experience for your customers? And, like David versus Goliath type story. with MicroAcquire, we're kind of fighting for the founders, and then all the other stuff that I just talked about.
Yeah.
But Salesforce had their enemy was on-premise software. They essentially invented SaaS. Do you know the company Drift? It's like a little chat thing. Yeah, they had a big campaign of just no forums. Like, no one wants to download an ebook anymore. Like, forums, go away, please. And I thought that was very clever. Box.com had some beef with Microsoft, which was definitely fun to watch. I've been around like long enough where I remember seeing in San Francisco like the billboard of like Box just basically saying Microsoft sucks. Uber and Lyft had a food fight for a while. That one probably went over the line maybe. But yeah, my point is there's other examples. It could be for your business. It could be expensive to like, I don't know. Like it could be, it doesn't have to necessarily be like a organization, or it definitely shouldn't be a person either. Like don't ever like just straight up call. That's not cool. Like if you have a problem with a person, call them and tell them your problems. Like that's like that's not, I don't support that at all. I think that's ticky-tacky and just a sign of just weak character if you're just literally, trying to tear someone down for your business's benefit.
One thing that's interesting, I think, is you probably watch some maybe beefs between individuals, is just how many of them maybe are planned or facilitated in some way. That is interesting. Like someone messaged me today because so like Nick Huber, who's has a popular Twitter profile under Sweaty Startup. Hopefully we'll have him on the show soon. He posted something like controversial, which I know is one of his top of funnel tweets, right? To try to get as much attention. And so I purposefully like aggressively disagreed with it, and then we're just separately texting like, oh, thanks for the engagement, right? Because we know that like if he strongly takes one stance and I strongly take the other stance, then like one, no one will think we're actually mad at each other. But then two, like it'll get a lot more attention and engagement. So a lot of people are doing some version of that. Or if you see it happening usually between two individuals, often they're probably on really good terms behind the scenes.
Yeah, I did not know that. That's me staying in my lane. I missed it. But yeah, I mean, that's business entertainment.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. But I think there's a line to be drawn, like if you do engage in stuff like that, number one, I think it's always great when like, if it's real and then they like, hey, we're cool now. Like, we did this in pub and now like, okay, we're on.
Like close that loop.
Yeah. I think that's really cool to see. But yeah, public food fights, not my thing. I don't have the appetite for that or any advice. But I will say Nick has come in hard on some of the stuff I've said. Like
that's his whole angle.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say about that though, that style, like shit posting, like some people have like VC funds on just based on like shit posting and stuff like that.
Right.
What I've noticed, because and this is probably a good tidbit for, if you're considering beef marketing, and what happens is you draw in a type of crowd that likes that negativity, and that can drain on you. And so if you just shit post all the time, like a large amount of your followers are just going to be shit posters, and they're going to be, then all your comments are like, you suck, blah, blah, blah. I mean, if you go on Nick's feed, you can just kind of look at his comments. He has like 1 million people just unfortunately insult. I kind of feel bad for him sometimes because I've also seen him comment how it affects him personally. I don't know him, so maybe he doesn't give a shit. But that's why, again, I say stay in my lane, just keep it positive. MicroAcquire's entire marketing strategy is literally just to inspire, support, encourage entrepreneurs. That's it. Mm-hmm. Not getting beefs with people and stuff like that.
So how do you there's the side that you're taking of using your personal brand for marketing, growing a Twitter audience, all of that. You're very off the cuff of just firing off tweets or things that you think about. But at the same time, you're a professional marketer and you tend to, from what I know about you in other places, like you're very methodical, you tend to track things really well. Do you track efforts that go into Twitter and like how that translates into, deals on MicroAcquire or new buyers or sellers, like listing companies or any of that?
So I'm a big believer so David Cancel from Drift said this really well, where I think I might have mentioned this to you the last time we talked, but he broke it down into like 3 phases where we've gone through 3 phases of SaaS. Like the first phase was invention, where the first person to kind of build the tool won the market. And then the second phase was the first company to really figure out the best go-to-market strategy, like LTV to CAC, AE SDR ratio, who could land grab the market fast enough. And then right now he calls what we're in today the Procter and Gamble phase, which is your brand. So it's the most defensible part about your business is your brand. Your technology can be copied. It's easier than ever to raise capital, to build a team, to do that. There's also other things like your culture and your team's talent and just, again, your unique insights into the market. People can copy chapter 1, but not chapter 2 and 3 and 4 that you have planned. So I think a lot about that in terms of just brand and market reputation. But so no, I don't measure it. When a tweet goes viral, like the one you just mentioned, I don't look at the comments, because when a tweet gets like 1,000 likes,
yeah,
oh my gosh, like the questions and the people who like disagree with you, and just, you start to enter, it's like you're in a stadium of, 200,000 people are reading this, and then like 200 people have comments. Not everyone's going to be like, yeah, like half of them are going to be like negative stuff. So
go bootstrappers or whatever else.
Yeah. So I push away all negative energy. So if it's not positive, I'm over it.
What you're describing is interesting of the stadium idea of, if you think about it, like maybe you're a immediate group of friends, you post something, the people who reply right away, you interact with them a bunch, like that's who's on the field or whatever. And then the next group is like the coaches, the diehard fans, whatever, like the support staff, everyone else, like those are your followers. And then you can tell every time that the tweet goes beyond that, because you start, like I had one on company culture that was like 1,000 retweets and went really far. And you could just immediately tell when it had gone to like 2 levels beyond the people who follow me, because it went totally off the rails. And you're right that the only thing you can do is like mute your own thread and move on.
Yeah, you could tell, because I usually will like everyone's tweets just because I respect everyone's opinions. Like bringing Nick back up, I remember I had a tweet just something about how entrepreneurs that have maybe struggled in their childhood have an advantage. He came in with like a strong disagreement, and it but I respected it. But then we kind of closed the loop with like, hey, like I think you're taking this out of context. So I'll respect everyone's opinion, but once it goes, I'll like all of them, and then once it goes viral, that's when it's like everything's just nuts. Like, I can't. Number one, I can't keep up with it, and then 2, I've probably already have moved on to like 3 or 4 other tweets that I'm thinking of or something like that. But I think that's another important side of just social media in general, is just understanding like everyone has a right to their opinions. So even if people do strongly like disagree, that's awesome. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. Everyone has, a unique view of life and how things work. And I respect all those opinions. But I think one thing about social media that can get kind of crazy is when you're taken out of context. Right. I've had that happen a couple of times. Like the one time with Nick, maybe he took it as, I think, like people with really great families, like divorced dads make less than married men. And I was like, Nick, no, this isn't about divorced families. It's just about like entrepreneurs struggling when they grow up. Like, okay, we're chill.
You're right.
And then I had another one. This is a crazy one. I had one. I tweeted out, hire people you'd be friends with. And that was literally someone literally took that as far as saying, nice job describing why tech is sexist and racist in 5 words.
Right.
And I was like, what? And I was hanging out with my son, so I didn't have like enough. I didn't catch it in time. And so I come back to my phone and I had to delete the tweet. And then I actually, put more like, hey, I meant that as like, hire people you'd be friends with and you'd care for them personally and professionally, not just hire a bunch of white people or something like that. Like, what? So sometimes you got to be careful when that kind of stuff goes down. And it's also just fascinating how people can, again, their perspectives, like their perspectives and their viewpoints. You can say one thing and it means one thing to you and something completely different to someone else.
Right. Yeah, I remember a time that Josh Pigford from Barometrics had a tweet about concerns in a resume when someone has had 10 roles in 10 years or kind of thing, or like jumps between roles every 12 months. And that I'm not even fully sure why, but that one, like, he got jumped on in a very similar way of people taking out of context and saying like, this is what's wrong with technology. And
let's talk about that for a second. So when you're taken out of context, just admit it. Just say, hey, that this is not what I meant. Mm-hmm. And then I recommend just deleting the tweet and just clarifying. Just like, hey, I wrote a tweet. This is what I actually did. I deleted the tweet. And then I said, hey, I had a tweet taken out of context. And it's obviously a little embarrassing, like, but it's the right thing to do is like, hey, like, that's not what I meant. So also admitting, that's not what you meant, but clarifying with people like, that was not my intention of those 5 words in any way, shape, or form, even like, that experience was so far off. I still kind of scratch my head on it. But my point being is, take one back. Like, hey, listen, I said something, it was taken out of context. I apologize. This is what I really meant for further clarification. And it'll just make your life a lot easier instead of trying to defend. Because another thing is, and this is also why I don't really comment too much on social media. Number one, it's just exhausting because you can have so many. Then you're like a full-time like customer support person on Twitter. Again, once you kind of engage with someone who vehemently disagrees with what you're saying or has taken you out of context, it's really hard to change their opinion, if not impossible. So even trying, if you just try, you lose. Like you just start throwing food and stuff like that. So that's just kind of some of the crazy stuff I've seen happen on Twitter as I've, gotten a little bit more active. Because I wasn't active on Twitter. So all this is like new to me too. I'm still learning like, oh, shit posters. I didn't know those existed.
Yes.
Or like, oh, wow, you can get really taken out of context and it can go viral and people can say some mean things. So yeah, again, going back to just saying, I stay in my lane and just talk about stuff that I like to talk about.
I like it. Something else that you've done that I hadn't seen other people do before, but I get it as a strategy. So separate from like just Twitter specific, but it's using Cameo and using spokespeople on Cameo for your business. So specifically, you got Chris Diamantopoulos from Silicon Valley and all of that to do announcement videos for partnerships. And one, they're amazing. But like, where did that come from? And how'd that turn into something that like, and now if someone says like Trace Camas, like in relation to MicroAcquire, everyone's like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
So for the longest time, it was just me running MicroAcquire. I was a solo founder, and on the team page, we just like, as I was working on the design with, I initially used an agency to help with the development. And there was a team page and I was like, just put Richard Hendricks, Gavin Belson, and Jin Yang from Silicon Valley. And it just kind of was, I just thought it was cool. Uh-huh. And some people like, called it out and was like, are these really your team members? And I'm like, yeah, they were super hard to recruit. So I'm a huge fan of the show because it is shockingly accurate and just hilarious. And then, yeah, so I actually, before, like right when I launched MicroAcquire, I went on Cameo, saw Russ Hanman, Chris, I can't pronounce his last name off the top of my head, but, he was available and he was like my favorite character. And I was like, yeah, you want to talk about MicroAcquire? And since then we built, a pretty good relationship in terms of, just working with him. And he's a really great guy. Like he's a really, really, really nice person. But my point here is I'm always thinking about I'm always learning, and I'm always trying to think of what is changing in marketing today. For example, the marketing playbooks that worked 5 years ago don't work as effectively today because everyone adopts them and starts using them. And then it starts to feel like marketing. And the best marketing doesn't feel like marketing. It's entertaining, or it captures your attention in a way where you go, whoa, I haven't seen that before. So I'm always trying to think of unique ways to capture, or actually, I should say, earn audience attention rather than buy it or, write some ebook and gate it and get your email and then send you 30 drip emails, which worked fantastically a decade ago, which killed it a decade ago. But so that's kind of where the thought process. And then candidly, I would say I might laugh the hardest at those videos. So it's like my guilty pleasure. Because they're not free, so I probably am laughing the hardest when those go out.
I've laughed pretty hard at a lot of them, especially as they end up in a series where they build on each other. He uses jokes that he first coined in a first video. And
yeah, a little background on that too is I didn't tell him to make up anything. He's made up Gazdecki style, micro gas, micro, I just basically, because you're only able to write in 2 sentences.
Okay.
And he's just a hilarious person. So any startup looking to, announce something, I highly recommend checking him out.
I guess how's the business side of it work? Right. Because if you go on his page in particular, it says $349 for personal use or $999 plus for business use, which makes sense that there would be a split there because you've obviously gotten a lot of earned attention from those. How does it work actually on the payment side?
In terms of using Cameo?
Yeah, using Cameo, maybe using Russ specifically. Well, Chris, not Russ, but using him specifically, or what you've done with other people on Cameo.
Yeah, so he's kind of the only. We did a partnership with Clearco, and I had the game, the rapper, do a Cameo just because I kind of went on a Cameo binge. I've been a fan of you forever.
Your credit card's on file, you're just sure.
Yeah. I was I'd love for you to just say MicroAcquire. This is awesome. Who else did we get? I can't remember off the top of my head, but what's been interesting to see with Chris is when I first booked him, he was $200. Now he's $5,000. So
okay,
he has definitely made some waves in the startup community, and so it's cool to see him making people laugh and helping startups get exposure, and then raising his prices too, which is I think something that most startups should do. So he's done a very good job of that. It went from $1K to $2K to $3K. Now it's at $5K. So he's expensive.
So that's when we see something like that, right? Of the $999 plus in the buying process, then later does it tell you oh, here's once you fill out the initial form, it'll tell you what the price is, or how's that work?
So there's a personal use, so you can use his personal. I don't know his personal cost, but let's say it's $500, and that would be for a birthday wish or something like that, which can be a great way to motivate your team. Hey team, great, Q1 or Q4 that's ending. Here's our goals for next year. Nathan wanted me to give you all a shout out. That'd be $500. But then a business use where you post a externally, so on Twitter or social media or within some sort of piece of marketing content, the price for that is usually 10x, internal use.
And then did any of the other ones that you tried, did you feel like they got attention or that kind of thing make you want to do it again? Or was it more just the ones with Chris that really resonated?
I think probably you'll see less cameos out of me.
Okay.
I think, there gets to a point and we could probably have another podcast about this, about like things with diminishing returns.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've kind of, used them so many times that, I mean, for the really big like announcements that we have coming up, like maybe twice next year or something like that. But I think there's sort of a diminishing return, especially with the cost, I think building in public kind of falls into that category a little bit. Audience exhaustion in terms of like paid ad campaigns.
Right.
So I'm always thinking of that stuff too. Are we overdoing it? Because then it just kind of starts to get corny. It's when you're doing it over and over and over and over. And it's not really like, whoa, he's here. Like, I didn't expect this. And when it starts to become expected, I think it loses kind of a little bit of luster.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Something else that you do a ton of is partnerships, whether it's with Pipe or AngelList or whoever. It feels like MicroAcquire is coming out with a partnership I don't know what the actual cadence is. I feel like it's every 2 weeks to a month. What's the strategy there? And is that like a very deliberate marketing strategy, or is it just like, look, this is a natural fit, and so we're just going to do a better job? It made sense to do the partnership, and we're just going to do a better job promoting it than most people do when they come out with a partnership.
Yeah, I mean, so the Pipe, Clearco, AngelList partnerships all made total sense. They help startups get acquired, which is, the purpose of our business. And, our main metric of success is helping startups get acquired. So helping them get financed increases the buyer pool, which then can lead to more acquisitions. So those made a ton of sense. And then we also want to expand internationally. So we partnered with essentially like the AngelList of Africa that serves 40 countries in Africa. And so I thought that was a really fun partnership in terms of, helping really underserved areas of the world, or support underserved areas of the world with MicroAcquire in terms of, just our message and just our encouragement. And we're going to continue those. So I'm actively speaking with individuals that are, accelerators or like startup boot camps in like Turkey or Europe or the UK or Australia. I have a number of conversations, but we'll probably go a little lighter on those, because I also feel like the partnership thing it's like, okay, another partnership, MicroAcquire, really? But that's, I think partnerships are what I would call a non-linear growth strategy. So it's basically, what you're doing is you're leveraging, number one, another company's brand. So you're borrowing some of their brand equity, saying like, hey, we're partnering. So their capabilities are now part of our capabilities, and vice versa. So there's benefits on both sides. And then, with products that, Pipe, Clearco, and AngelList offer specifically, it adds value to our product. So it's like a win-win-win. It's a good marketing play, good brand play, and then it's a good just, product play without a lot of, engineering needed.
Is there do you have engineers internally just devoted to, these integrations, or do they tend to be more on the marketing, or business ops side rather than on the product side? Because they can be expensive on the product side.
Yeah, they definitely can. I would say they're more on the marketing side than on, like, for example, the AngelList partnership is just a landing page that, so Avlock, the CEO of AngelList, is an investor in MicroAcquire, and then Naval is an investor in MicroAcquire. And so I pointed at this other company that was making an SPV product for private equity firms. And I just said, can you make me a landing page? I'll promote it. And so inside MicroAcquire, there's like a drop down that says raise funds, and then it takes you to a landing page. So minimal product integration there, but it's just kind of like us saying, hey, if you're looking to raise funds, this is where we recommend you doing it. Right. We've done that with Mercury Bank as well, which is just again, you acquire a company, you probably want to transfer those assets into a new entity. That new entity is going to need a bank account. So we're just kind of getting all they're almost like perks, if you will.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then it's not this big integration that you're having to maintain for years to come, or.
Yeah, no, it's not like a Facebook, like a, SSO login or something like that. It's a lot simpler. It's usually just like a link kicking over to a landing page, driving traffic to them, and then we get some sort of kickback for whatever business we drive to them.
Is there anything in particular that's worked well on like the partnerships that have been a huge boost, right? Where either you've gotten a bunch more attention for MicroAcquire or built the brand. Like, are there things you see in common on those ones where you're like, yes, that was a home run, versus the ones where you're like, I think that was worth the time to put together, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say all of them. I'd say my favorite are definitely the Clearco and Pipe partnerships. Like Carrie Hurst, the CEO of Pipe, he bought me this to kick off our partnership. It's a signed Mike Tyson glove.
Nice.
And we've done a number of acquisitions together. I think their company's fantastic. I love working with their team. Clearco, same thing. So Pipe helps finance all of our SaaS deals exclusively, and then Clearco, all of our e-commerce deals exclusively. And they're just great teams, and it's a clear need. Some people want to finance these with these companies, and we make it extremely seamless to connect with those companies. And we even do like pre-financing. So if you're a founder looking to sell on MicroAcquire and you want to give a line of, potential financing in advance to a buyer, we can pre-approve a seller. So it just makes kind of the, when you're going to buy a home, it's like it's pre-financed or something like that. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but those are partnerships that really add, like they were on the product roadmap, and they just, we just went to the best ones in the market with the most credibility, with the largest capital pools, but also with the engineering resources. So, anytime a company is, financed through Pipe, we get a notification within Slack that says like, hey, add pre-approval number to this company. So we instead of working with like a ton of different financing partners, we just pick the best ones, right, and then integrate it deeply with them.
That makes sense. One other thing that I wanted to ask about before we wrap up is on the sort of the investor influencer side. You have a lot of people like, you mentioned Naval and others who have invested in MicroAcquire. And is that helping you, amplify some of these things on Twitter, amplify these partnerships, open doors in some way? Do you think you get something similar with like a influencer program, or has the investor side really been a good angle for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, there's definitely the group of investors that MicroAcquire has is like all my like idols, like, founders of companies that, I like, Dharmesh from HubSpot, Naval, like from AngelList, like those are some of my favorite companies, and I get to interact with them on a very limited basis. I don't reach out to them for advice very often. So I think that also adds to just, brand equity of just being a marketplace, and us wanting to build this with the startup community. That was kind of more the thought process behind it. But no, I mean, you could even look at my likes. Has Naval ever liked something of mine? No. Has Dharmesh maybe once? So no, I don't rely on them for like social media support or anything like that. But it is a good way in terms of, when you raise from entrepreneurs, you get kind of, again, unique insights because most of them have been through M&A. So typical VCs, but I really like that style of fundraising is when, obviously I'm a bigger advocate of bootstrapping because that's kind of, where I've spent or had the most success. But if you're going to raise capital, I recommend entrepreneurs first because they have experience building a business. And then typically with, acquisitions, specifically in my case, which is, extremely helpful.
Yeah. You and I are both known for bootstrapping, and we're also, I think, pretty well known for not being that dogmatic about it, of being like, here's what we did. Here's why it worked well. Here's why the other path can be fine too, rather than being super dogmatic in one camp or the other.
Yeah, that's one thing I'll probably like one thing I've noticed since like being vocal about bootstrapping, that I think is a little like toxic is there's like such a, if you're funded, it's like, I hate you. And then if you're bootstrapped, it's just like, venture capital's just a tool. And if you know how to use the tool correctly, it can be a great accelerant to your business. And everything comes with a cost. So when you bootstrap, you have to kind of eat glass for much longer. I've lived that life, but at the end, the rewards can be epic, So if your goal, I always say if your goal is to make money, you should probably bootstrap, because you can sell the business whenever you want. You have no approvals, you own the whole thing. Like Nathan, if you wanted to sell your business, that done. You don't have any investor approvals or saying, no, you need to hit that $1 billion mark. But if you want to really disrupt the market or change a market or go a little bit bigger, faster, venture capital is just a tool to accelerate that. But it all comes with a cost. So the cost of bootstrapping is sometimes you have to do customer support for longer. You have to, do some of these roles where you can't bring in, talent earlier. And then the cost of venture capital is, you give up equity and then control within your business. There's usually controls of you need approval to raise capital. You need approval to, sell your business. So everything comes with a cost, and it's just pros and cons. But again, I think bootstrapping makes sense for 99% of entrepreneurs because, the bar today is building $1 billion business. And that's like, that's not easy to do. And so for so many first-time founders, I'm a big fan of stair-stepping into entrepreneurship. Like I have one of my favorite tweets that I've ever written just personally is, start with an agency, get to cash flow positive, and then bootstrap an asset, whether that's a SaaS company or e-commerce business, sell that asset, become, financially secure, and then do whatever you want. Swing for the fences, go lay on a beach, whatever. But along the way, you kind of prepare yourself for the next stage of business. Yeah, kind of a rant there, but I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I have an article titled "The Ladders of Wealth Creation" that touches on a similar idea of using the skills from one ladder to move up to the next and go from there. Well, this has been fun. I always enjoy watching the partnerships, what you're doing on Twitter and everywhere else. I think that MicroAcquire is a great example of what you can build with an audience. So thanks for coming on and hanging out with me, and we'll have to talk soon.
Yeah, Nathan, thanks for having me, man. Enjoyed the chat.
All right, I'll catch you later.
See you, man.